Hello everyone, welcome to the What If Anime YouTube channel. Today, we're diving into an exciting new story that will take your imagination to the next level. Let's get started. What if Naruto was the eldest son of Kronos and Percy Jackson? Now let's start. Of King's Blood Chapter 1. Often does not own Naruto or Percy Jackson and the Olympians. They belong to their respective owners. Click clack click clack. The Newton's cradle made a satisfactory noise every time the divine silver balls struck each other. A woman with long platinum hair stared at the toy intently as she leaned back in her black leather office chair. She glanced down at her mahogany desk and at the book open on it. It was a thick black book with a thick spine and the symbol of a spindle burned onto the front. The pages were yellowed and dusty and filled with elaborate cursive writing in a language the world had never seen before. It was both the bane of her existence and the reason for her existence. It was her purpose and her curse. It was her life and her death. From her book, she ruled the world. From her book, she watched the world burn. This was her curse. From her little chair and book, every action of almost every being in the universe was planned. Every breath, every choice, every death was planned from her book. She was the first puppet master and would be the last. She could count the number of people beyond her power on one hand, but it appeared that day they wished to intervene as a gust of wind whipped through her pocket dimension. It blew open her book to a page the woman had not seen in over 5,000 years. Silver energy and words written in a language lost in time flew from the page, flying through the air like little butterflies before they engulfed the room in their energy. The woman's eyes widened for a second, revealing their glowing silver and the clock that seemed to tick inside of them. An infinite army stood before 6 beings. 3 were women. 1 was tall and regal, like one would imagine a queen. She wore form-fitting golden armor that glowed with vitality. Her appearance kept changing as well as 1 second her hair would be silver and her eyes and bright as a god's true form. The next her hair was dark and her eyes a calculating brown. The woman to her left looked so much like her yet very different as well. Her bright green eyes watched the arm. Why with an almost childish glee, and her bright golden hair was filled with leaves and dirt, like one would get from rolling around on the earth. Her armor was made of brown leather and green metal that looked like it was alive. Like it was the life force of all the living creatures on earth. The last woman was short compared to her companions and her beauty wasn't loud or as stunning as theirs either. It was subtle and quiet, that short time between sunset and night, but as bright as the rising sun itself. Her petite body was covered in leather armor and a long brown robe. 3 were men. 1 W, as a towering man covered in rippling muscles with long black hair and electric blue eyes that crackled with literal lightning. His golden armor glistened in the bright light given off by his long cyl. Inder of bronze that gave off an aura of power felt for miles around. The man next to him had the weathered visage of a voyager who faced 1,000 storms and the body of a man whose muscles were as strong as the waves he rode. Blue energy thrummed from his bronze trident like the unrelenting current of the sea, and his blue armor looked like it was forged from the crests of tsunamis. The third man was unlike his brothers. Long hair as dark as Erebus was tied back into a ponytail and his were as black as a nightmare. His black armor looked like it was carved from obsidian and gold, while a black robe was wrapped around his body. In his hand was a bronze helmet carved with promises of death that radiated a level of fear the world had never felt before. The army before them was vast, filling the entire field from end to end. Cyclops, hydras, hellhounds, dracons, monsters from every dark corner of the earth had traveled far to beyond this battleground. Clangs of rusty iron weapons against rusty iron armor along with random animalistic grunts were the melody that filled the field. The man with the thunderbolt pointed his weapon at the army, an unreadable look on his face like staring into a hurricane. A bolt of pure energy shot from his weapon and struck the ground, thus beginning the greatest war the world had or would ever see. The 6 gods released their true form simultaneously, engulfing the field in 6 different colors. As soon as the divine light struck the front line, the monsters that stood there were vaporized into particles of gold dust. The 6 then split up, each disappearing with a speed unfollowable to the monsters until one appeared right in front of them. The youngest brother thrust out with his weapon, launching a bolt of condensed lightning that struck the ground with enough force leave a kilometer-wide crater in the ground. Not to mention vaporizing all of the monsters within the kilometer. He smirked before lashing out again, launching another bolt. The middle brother spun his three-pronged polearm with expertise before slamming it onto the ground. A blast rippled through the field and he was the epicenter. He struck the ground again, although this time with the trident head itself. A louder crack could be heard this time as the entire ground before him spilt. Monsters roared as they fell into the fissure, only to be silenced as he closed up the gap with a tap of his trident. The third man had no obvious weapon like his brother. Instead, he simply placed his helmet on his head and like a shockwave, all of the monsters found themselves frozen with fear. The man smirked as he disappeared, disintegrating into shadows. Then the monsters knew nothing as their throats were slit by a shadow. This was the beginning of the greatest war in history. 3 men stood at the end of a fine dining table. The 3 men were not wearing their elaborate battle armor but fancy togas like one would wear to a part. The table had once been covered end to end with maps and charts and plans, but today it was empty. In fact, the only thing the table had been covered with that day was delicious food and fine drink as gods and titans celebrated. "We shall draw for the right to be king," the man of lightning announced as he placed a goblet down on the table. It was made of divine silver and inside was 3 sticks made of imperial gold. All 3 brothers' arms blurred and suddenly the 3 sticks were gone from the goblet were in each of their hands. The middle brother glanced the lot in his hand with a raised eyebrow. "See," the youngest frowned as he read the ancient Greek word, underworld. The corner of the eldest brother's lip quirked ever slightly upwards. "Heaven." There was a moment of silence when suddenly a cylinder of bronze appeared red in the youngest's hand with a flash of light, and he pointed it directly at the eldest brother's face. "You will give me that domain, Hades." A bronze helmet appeared on Hades's head, releasing a burst of fear and cold through the room. "It is mine, Zeus." The master bolt began to spark dangerously in front of Hades's face. "Unless you wish to reform for the next 1,000 years, you will give me that domain." The room was cold enough for the 3 gods' breath to be visible. "I will make you afraid of the dark, little brother." The middle brother slammed his bronze trident onto the ground, cracking the marble below them. "Brothers." Frost began to gather around Hades' feet as the room's temperature continued to drop. "Step down, Poseidon. I will be king," Zeus growled as the master bolt started to glow pure white with charged energy. The shadows in the room appeared to gradually grow darker until they began to engulf the room. "Over my dead body. That can be arranged," Zeus muttered. A blah, saint of white energy shot from the master bolt and flew at Hades at speeds not comprehensible to a mortal. The eldest of the 3 only had enough time to create a bubble of shadows in front of him or the bolt of pure electricity broke through and slammed into his chest. Hades flew back, striking one of the white marble columns with enough force to crack it. Zeus knelt down, picking up the real gold lot that Hades had dropped and crushed it in his hand. There was a release of energy that threatened to knock all 3 brothers over, but Zeus contained it in his hand. Golden winds began to envelop Zeus as the domain of heaven ingrained itself in his body. "Bull, ice Korakas," Hades groaned as he stood up, the ichor in his blood beginning to heal the damage to his back already, but it did not help with the pain. "I will not be the one going to the crows today, brother." Zeus smirked and threw his elder brother the last lot, underworld. Hades looked at it for a second before crushing it in his hand. His white toga turned pitch black with gold accents as shadows began to surround him and implant themselves in his clothing. "This is not the last you have seen of me, Zeus. You may have heaven, but one of these days, everything you own will crumble without me and you will come begging." Hades swore before the shadows embraced him and he was gone. Poseidon walked up to his younger brother with a look of concern. "Was that really wise?" "Who cares? He wouldn't have been a good king anyway," Zeus said with a grin, his eyes filled with the madness of power. "Zeus," Poseidon began before he was cut off, "I offer you a high-ranking place on the council, brother, for your silence." "No one will believe Hades' rambling if you back me," Zeus explained. Poseidon paused. "Very well." He shed the golden rod in his palm and instantly water molecules all around them began to surround him, dyeing his toga a dark blue. "You are dismissed, god of the sea," Zeus said as he began to leave the room. "Thank you, my lord," Poseidon said before he too disappeared in a burst of seawater. Neither knew the grave mistake that they had just made. The silver-eyed woman slammed the book shut quickly, to prevent it from releasing any more history from its confines. With a sigh, she leaned back into her chair and began to think. The Titans were rising and the rift between the big three might cost the gods the war. Hades held grudges until the end and Zeus was too conceited to ask for help. Help, that's what the gods and demigods needed. It's time for the firstborn to awaken, the primordial saw into herself as she stood up from her chair. With a snap of her fingers, a letter in a silver envelope sparked into existence. Then just like that, it disappeared, although this time there was a note sprawled in silver ink on it. As she stood up, her book opened up to the last page, a picture of a man with blonde hair standing on a mountain and watching the world below him with a content smile on his face. The woman took a deep breath. Her plan solidified in her head. She should have been the god of gambling instead. And like that, she was gone. In a land beyond time and space, a forgotten god awoke. The 8-year-old boy's bright blue eyes snapped open, absorbing the world for the first time in thousands of years. Ah! He groaned as he sat up from his bed. The boy ran a hand through his spiky gold hair as he glanced down at the white toga covering his slim body and toward the congealed blood on his side. Congealed blood. The boy's eyes widened in shock as he suddenly remembered. Father. Flashback. A boy ran through the halls of the palace with a glee only a child had. The marble columns sparkled in the afternoon sunshine and so did the boy's bright gold hair. Father's never going to catch me. The boy cried as he searched for a place to hide. Behind a pillar is too obvious, the boy muttered as he walked past one of his possible hiding spots. He took a glance at one of the large curtains that covered the grand windows of the palace. The boy's giggling got exponentially louder when he heard a familiar voice. Where are you, my son? The boy was about to dive behind the curtain when he heard a noise. He whipped around and quickly caught the arrow that was speeding at him. It, however, was not enough to save him as spikes shot out from the shaft and impaled his hand. Ah! The boy roared as he pulled the arrow out of his hand. His eyes widened in surprise as he recognized what the green ooze on the edge of the arrow was from his studies. Hellion dragon venom, the boy mumbled under his breath. Hellion dragon venom was an incredibly rare poison as it was one of the few things that can scatter the essence of an immortal. The doors flew open, revealing a man and woman. The woman's eyes were the color of sea glass and had the figure of a literal goddess, or rather, a titaness. Her hair was unusual as it was short and spiky on the right side, while longer and straight on the left side. The man was tall and slim while his eyes were the color of molten gold. In his hand was one of the most beautiful and dangerous weapons in the world. It was at least 6 feet tall with an incredibly long blade made out of celestial bronze and adamantine. My son, the woman cried out as she raced to the blond boy's side. The boy smiled weakly as his mother rested her head on his lap. Hello, mother. The man stared at the wound like he was trying to burn the poison out of it through sheer willpower alone. Who did this to you? The boy coughed up a little ichor. I don't know. A arrow from the east. The woman ran a hand through his hair. Don't worry, my son. We can get you healed. Mother, Mnemosine has made me memorize every. The boy started to cough so hard. Golden ichor splattered onto his father's face. Monster there is. Hellion dragon venom is incurable. Rest, my son. Preserve your strength, the golden hair man said with a comforting smile. The boy smiled sadly. Goodbye, mother. Fath, he gave another hacking cough before he closed his eyes for the last time. Naruto. Ria roared as she placed her hands on her son's chest and began to pump, trying to restart the movement of ichor through her son's body. It was for naught as the boy named Naruto simply disintegrated into a pile of silver dust that blew away in the wind. Ray's US band gripped the handle of his scythe with enough force to make his knuckles white. He was about to say something to his wife when there were 3 flashes of light. 3 elderly women stood before the king and queen of Mount Othrys and bowed their heads. Lord Kronos, we have a prophecy about your children for you. Kronos' face scrunched up into a snarl as his golden eyes hardened and he wiped the golden blood of his first son from his face. That was the end of the true golden age. End of flashback. Father, mother, Naruto mumbled as his head fell into his hands and he wept. He wept, Reem, bearing the life he once had with his family when he felt a comforting hand on his shoulder. He glanced up to see a beautiful woman with silver hair and eyes that were hidden behind glasses. She was wearing an incredibly fancy black suit that contoured to her body while in her hand was a black and silver book that looked incredibly powerful. "Who are you?" Naruto asked. He attempted to shift his body in case he needed to defend himself, but he barely had enough energy to do that. The woman held out her hands to calm him down. "Relax, child. My name is Anank. I was the first being to be born of chaos and the one who has directed all others who were born after me." Naruto thought about what the woman had just said before nodding in understanding. "You're like the conductor who tells what each musician should play to make the piece sound its best. You could say that." Anank smiled. "And now I'm here to bring you back to the world so you can finish what you had started." Naruto paused and thought about what was being offered to him for a second. He had spent who knew how long in this bed, not to mention the fact he had to go find the bastard that had killed him. However, it was Anan's next words that was the final nail in the coffin. "I'll also bring you back to see your mother." Naruto nodded. "Very well, but what of my father?" Anank paused and tried to think of the best way to explain the fact that his father had been thrown in Tartarus for swallowing Naruto's siblings before he was defeated. She was going to say just that when she felt the pocket dimension begin to collapse. "We must go. I shall explain the rest later," Anank said. With that, she grabbed Naruto's arm and caused them to both disappear with a flash of silver light. The former queen of the Titans hummed a happy tune to herself as she cleaned up her vast garden. The entire backyard of her large Japanese house was covered in beautiful trees and enough colorful flowers to make the backyard look like a giant mosaic. Rei's life had been rather relaxing for the last few thousand years after the Teotonomachi. After the death of her firstborn, her husband had gone mad with anger. Gong was the fair and just king the realm had known, and instead, an anger-filled ruler took his place. He had ruled the realm with an iron fist and was incredibly ruthless, especially in his search for his son's killer. It got even worse when Kronos was told of the fates prophecy that one of Kronos' new children with Rhea would overthrow him. It was then the Titan Lord lost it and swallowed his first daughter, Hestia. Rhea was so horrified as she watched her husband swallow their children that she was forced to hide her final son. It was once the youngest was fully grown that she had helped him force Kronos to regurgitate his siblings. It was then she had fled across Gaia, fearing both Kronos' wrath and the coming war that would occur. After her children had won, she had encouraged them to separate Kronos' domains upon them so none fell to the temptation of power. She had watched as her children threw her siblings into Tartarus and set her elder brothers as guards. She watched as Hades left Olympus immediately after the celebration, while Poseidon had decided to build a giant city called Atlantis on one of the 8 continents of the earth. Zeus had become king of Olympus and begun to allow his many children to take seats on the council, but never his eldest brother. Well, not his true eldest brother. Naruto had always been a sore point for Rhea, as he was supposed to be a new start for Rhea and Kronos. A child that didn't have to suffer a terrible childhood like they did. Instead, he was killed and the cycle of hatred repeated with her other 6 children. "Hello." The Titan Queen whipped around in surprise. She recognized that voice. Naruto. Standing before the Titan Queen was her little boy. The same golden hair, the same bright sky blue eyes, the same whisker birthmarks. He was still wearing the gold and white toga she had given him for his birthday over 10,000 years ago. He was still short, only coming up to her shoulder, but he was lean and muscular due to his training with Kronos and his uncle Atlas. Before Naruto could even answer, Rhea had scooped him up in her arms and was squeezing him like she was never going to let him go. "How are you here? Where have you been? Why do you look the same? Do you know how much we've missed you?" Naruto wrapped his mother with a big hug. "I love you too, Mom." Suddenly, Naruto felt an incredible pain on his ear as he was almost lifted off his feet by his mother. "Where have you been for the last few millennia? Ow 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 ow. Answer your mother." Rhea roared, her face the color of a bar of gold. "Ask the Silver Lady," Naruto roared as he tried to detach his mother's hand from his ear. "And you know, don't rip off my ear. Smartass." Ria mumbled before casting her eyes at the other immortal in the garden. Anank frowned. It's a bit of a long story. Ria let go of her son's ear but not before giving him a light swat on the back of the head. Don't back-talk to your mother. I don't care. I'm just happy my son is with me, Ria admitted. She looked up at the other woman who felt a little awkward in this family reunion. Anank, no one has seen you since the second age. It's a bit of a long story, Anank admitted. She wrapped her arms around her son and squeezed him tight. I don't care. I just want to be with my little kitsune, Ria said as she twirled Naruto's spiky blonde in her hand. Naruto nodded and snuggled himself into his mother's arms. I missed you too, Mom. Naruto nodded in agreement before he realized something. Wait, what does kitsune mean? Hey guys, it's often. So I used to be Knife of Shadows but I decided to change my pen name. I'm not the same kid who started this account almost 2.5 years ago, so I decided to give this story a new twist, some new life. Stay tuned because I'm back and so is this story. Check out Chapter 2, Often. Chapter 2, of King's Blood. Chapter 1. Often does not own Naruto or Percy Jackson and the Olympians. They belong to their respective owners. Why is Tartarus so dark and dingy this time of the year? Naruto mumbled under his breath. His hand was aglow with an almost blinding light as he released only part of his energy. It was a trick his father had created and it was perfect for passing through the dark tunnels of Tartarus. Not to mention no monster would dare fight 3 immortals, especially one releasing his true form. We're about to ease your father from his prison for the last several thousand years and you're making jokes about the humidity of Tartarus, Ria deadpanned. If there's one thing Uncle Krios taught me, it was terrible. Naruto paused and grinned. Timing. Ria just stared at him. She never should have left the boy with his father and uncles. He had picked up too many bad habits from them. Geez, tough crowd, Naruto muttered under his breath. He turned back to the path with his arm raised high to fight off any of the darkness. Tartarus was a perfect place for a prison as with every step, Naruto felt like his lungs were being slowly crushed under the weight of the world. The stalagmites of Erebus were sharp enough to shish kebab a Drakon while the sound of the constant dripping of water from the river Styx felt like a drill against his forehead. It was enough to drive anyone mad. Where in Tartarus is he? Ria pondered. Ria had reason to be confused. The tunnels all looked almost identical and it was only through Naruto's suggestion to follow the tunnels that were the hottest that they had a slight idea of where they were going. His father was placed in the core of Tartarus, so it could be assumed that the tunnels that lead to the hottest part of Tartarus would lead to him. Literally, where in Tartarus is he? Naruto mumbled. He ignored the roll of the eyes he received and began to think of a plan. His eyes widened as he thought of a great one. I have an idea. If Mom and I release our energy at the same time, he will respond. How are you so sure? Anank asked, an eyebrow raised. Naruto's face grew solemn and he turned away. Trust me, if he wants to see me as bad as I want to see him, he will respond. Anank nodded in understanding as she thought about her own children. The fates NDED to take the forms of elderly women to make the gods fearful, but Anank remembered when they were children, playing around at the dawn of eternity. They were kind and innocent, unaware of the destiny of pain that was set for them. Ria nodded in understanding of the plan. She took a deep breath as she prepared to release her energy for the first time in 4 millennia. 3, 2, Naruto took a deep breath. 1. At the count of 1, Ria and Naruto simultaneously activated their true forms and focused it so that the energy radiated off of them like the shockwave of an explosion. Immediately, there was a rumble as the cave walls began to cave in under the power of the 2 powerful immortals. Amazing, Anank mumbled under her breath. Naruto was only 8 years old but was able really ace just as much energy as his mother, who was already beginning to sweat from the constant output of power. Naruto on the other hand barely seemed phased. It could be argued that Ria wasn't a combat titaness, but regardless, she was still an elder immortal and Naruto was still young. Naruto's future was interesting. While Anank could see the general path he was going to take in his eternal life, had he was going to be and how he was going to do it was a mystery to everyone. Not even the fates could predict Naruto, eldest child of the king and queen of Mount Othris. It's not enough, Naruto grunted. The output Naruto and his mother was putting out wasn't powerful enough to radiate through the rest of Tartarus. He shut his eyes and took a moment to pause. His eyes were closed but he could see all around him. The ichor flowing through the veins of Aang, the darkness radiating off the walls of Tartarus and the swirling of his great-grandfather below him. He had to go deeper. This understanding of the world was basic, plastic, superficial. It was like trying to understand the ocean by staring at the foam that washes to the surface. To understand what was beyond, you must understand what is within. Naruto reached farther into his immortal soul and pulled out something that he had felt was always hidden inside of him. It was like his body had been shackled down his whole life and it was only now he had the key. It was time for the lead weights to be dropped. Ah, the most guttural roar ripped from his body as he fell to his knees in pain. Enough energy poured from his body to shatter the walls of the tunnel and it was only a barrier of silver energy that Aang put up that stopped it from crushing them. Waves of golden energy continued to shoot from his body, each one threatening to knock the two elder immortals over. Wind began to generate around Naruto, a twisting cyclone enveloping the young god while the ground below him began to crack. "What's going on?" Rhea screamed in an attempt to be heard by Aang over the wind. "He's awakened his domains," Aang said explained. Naruto gripped his sides as the energy began to reverse direction, rushing into his body with enough force to push him backwards into one of the cave walls. However, it was not just his own golden energy that was being pulled toward him as parts of Rhea and Ananke's was grabbed. A river of gold, silver and green energy raced into Naruto's body while all he could do was just grit his teeth and wait as his body rearranged itself molecule by molecule. Then suddenly it stopped and Naruto fell to his side, his body slightly smoking and his eyes glowing brighter than they had ever before. "That was interesting," Aang admitted. Before she could check to see what Naruto's domains were, there was a burst of energy that was not nearly as powerful as Naruto's but still detectable. Naruto groaned as he rolled onto his back. "What was that?" Rhea pursed her lips. "That was your father." And without another word, Rhea began to walk down the now collapsed tunnel toward her husband. In a cell made entirely from the black rocks of Erebus in glowing celestial bronze inscribed with runes of incredible power sat a man. Well, barely a man. He looked like he was in his early 30s and had bright gold hair that was stuck to his forehead with a layer of dirt and grime. His once bronze and flawless skin had become pale and was still slightly ruined due to him still regenerating. But it was his eyes that were the most terrifying. The once beautiful molten gold of his eyes had become dull, pale and lifeless as his mortal soul is slowly broken. That perhaps was one of the curses of immortality as the torture simply went on forever and ever. He raised a hand toward one of the wall. LS which began to glow blue as another slash was carved onto it. It was one more added to the tens of thousands that covered all of the walls. "Happy anniversary," the Titan of Time mumbled as he laid down on the floor. A sad side effect of being the Lord of Time is the constant pain of knowing how much time has passed. So for the man, he remembered and felt every second he had spent in this forsaken cell. Then he felt it, a burst of energy of the likes that he had not felt in thousands of years ripped through the cell and shook the ground with its force. "Wait," the Titan mumbled. He took a deep breath before releasing some of the energy he had been storing for the past 5,000 years. That alone was enough to crack a few of the Arabian walls and splinter the ground. It was not powerful enough, however, to stop the regeneration runes that had been placed on the walls which repaired them almost instantaneously. It was barely enough, but it was enough as minutes later, he heard the thumping of footsteps on the dense earth of Tartarus. Then he heard a voice. "Father." The Titan Lord's golden eyes snapped open in surprise as he leapt from his spot on the floor and grabbed the bars of his prison. His face pressed against it in an attempt to see more. Then he saw it, his dead son living and breathing before him. His once pale yellow eyes burned gold once more, however not with joy but with anger. "What trickery is this?" His teeth bared as he growled in anger at the golden-haired boy before him. "How dare you pretend to be my son? I will rip you to shreds for your disrespect." Another being stepped forward and their next words silenced the Titan of the Harvest. "There is no trickery, husband." A gorgeous woman with beautiful and unusual black and silver hair glared at the Titan Lord from the other side of the cell. Her arms were on her hips and her face was almost glowing. There was so much ichor in her face. Rhea, he mumbled in fear. He tried to back away from the sea. But was not fast enough as Rhea reached into the Arabian cell and grabbed the Titan by what remained of his shirt, pulling him as hard as could against the bars. You dumbass grain head, Rhea roared at her husband. Rhea, Kronos began only to be cut off by a slap to the face that was hard enough to leave a golden mark on his face. Don't you dare Rhea me. You broke our family apart. You tried to eat our kids. You started a giant war. Lastly, you got your stupid wheat-filled ass stuck in this prison. You, Kronos, are the— Rhea began to rant only to be cut off by hand on her shoulder. Mother, leave him alone. Kronos' voice got caught in his throat. Naruto. Hello father, Naruto said. His bright smile was bright enough to light up part of the dark Tartarus and his eyes shone within unnatural light, like behind each eye was a sparkling star. I've missed you so much, Kronos said. How are you here? Naruto smirked and pointed behind him with his thumb. Because of her, Kronos. My daughters deemed your crimes were worthy of eternal imprisonment. However, your son is vital in the survival of the cosmos, Anank said, her silver energy slowly escaping her body. I will give you one chance to prove yourself. That is all. Test me and I will make you fade. Kronos was not often terrified. Hell, he killed his father for a blade on a stick and fought his children who had the most powerful weapons in the world, but Anank, one of the first primordials, threatening him with permanent death. Kronos had only one option. Of course Anank. Anank stared him in the eyes for a few seconds before nodding. Very well. With a wave of her hand, the bars of the cell melted into a pile of molten silver on the floor. The runes attempted to activate and sound the alarm, but a snap of Ananki's fingers dissolved those as well. As soon as the cell was open, Naruto raced forward and wrapped his father in a big hug. A golden tear went down the side of his face as he held his father for the first time. Naruto had always been incredibly close to his father, often sitting at his father's feet when Kronos was at Mount Othras. Similarly, Kronos had always tried to be close to his son since his father never was to him. Not to mention the fact that Gia barely knew he existed until he killed Oranos for her. You are lucky I don't kill you, Rhea growled. Kronos gulped and was about to respond when Naruto grabbed his mother around the waist with his other arm and pulled them both in. For the first time in over 10,000 years, the king, queen and prince of Orthes held each other. Naruto was the first to break away as he watched his parents embrace for the first time since his death. I love you grain head, Rhea said to her husband. I love you too, mother hen, Kronos responded, a smile on his face for the first time in so long. Kronos and Rhea had always been in love, dancing upon the beaches of Gia, late-night swims in the waters of Pontus and watching the stars under Oranos. Before we leave, there is one thing we must do, Anank reminded. We must find your elder brothers. Kronos nodded in understanding. The elder Cyclops and the Hecatonkires were both his oldest brothers and his jailers, so if they came by and found him not in his cell, they would immediately notify Zeus, and that would not be good. Ananki's silver clock eyes glowed bright and she snapped his fingers. I've got it. There was a bending of space-time and suddenly, the four immortals were not in front of Kronos' cell but instead near the moat of lava at the edge of Tartarus. Who goes there? A voice boomed. The ground shook as 6 beings of incredible power appeared before Naruto and his family. 3 of the beings looked incredibly strong as they were at least a dozen feet tall and had more muscles than Atlas. However, the most prominent feature was the fact that all of them only had one giant eye in the center of their foreheads. The other 3's appearance was even more bizarre, due to the 100 arms and 50 heads they had on their giant bodies. Each head usually had a different expression, although now, most were either confused or enraged. Kronos, how did you get out of your cell? One of the Cyclops roared. He was about to pull out a weapon to bring back the wounded Titan Lord to his cell when Rhea stepped forward with her hands up. It's okay brothers, he is with us. All 3 of the elder Cyclops looked a little apprehensive while the Hecatonkires glanced at each other before shrugging all 100 of their shoulders simultaneously. One of the eldest children of Gia stepped forward and bowed his heads to the woman in front. Rhea, you look as beautiful as ever. Rhea smiled her beautiful smile. Ah Briars, such a flirt. Kronos growled territorially, drawing the attention back to him. One of the Cyclops. Zeus will not be happy that Kronos is out. He has not authority here. Lady Ananke. Hello nephews. Ananke said with a nice smile. We would like to ask something of you. Anything for your my lady. Good. We would like for you to stand aside and to not tell Zeus of what has transpired today. We cannot lie to him due to an oath to th. Sticks we have taken, however, if he does not ask, we shall not tell. Very well. Ananke nodded with pursed lips. There is one more thing. Ananke gestured at Naruto had been silent in this entire conversation. I would like to commission you 6 to forge a weapon of power for your nephew. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Weapons of powers were not a simple broadsword that just anyone could use. No, a weapon of power was aligned with its wielder's domains and usually became the user's. Symbol of power. Zeus's master bolt, Poseidon's trident, Hades' helm, Kronos' scythe. They were all incredibly powerful. On their own, but in the hands of the god they were made for, it was catastrophic. The 6 eldest children of Gaia looked at each other and an almost telepathic conversation occurred between the 6 of 303 eyes. He is powerful, Argus mumbled with a stroke of his double chin. What are his domains? That question caused the group to go silent. Naruto glanced at Ananke, who nodded and placed a hand on his forehead. With a grunt, Naruto tried to reach for that hidden cage inside of him only to be surprised when it was open. The golden energy engulfed his once more. The Gulf O. F wind released this time was powerful enough to briefly harden the lava around them. Ananke bowed her head to the young boy. All hail Naruto, god of the greater heavens, bonds, energy, peace, nature and fate. There was a moment of silence as the surprise seeped in. Zeus had the domain of heaven and almost activities above the earth. All of the waters of the earth was ruled by Poseidon from his underwater palace. Lastly, there was Hades, who ruled everything below the surface. But there was a final piece. It was known as the Greater Heaven and it consisted of everything beyond the clouds. From meteors to the farthest stars. The Greater Heaven consisted of everything that was beyond the earth. Those are incredibly powerful domains, Katas said, a bit of shock still evident in his voice. Quote, we shall forge a weapon that will stand up to weapons of his siblings. Naruto smiled and bowed slightly. Thank you, uncles. It would be an honor to wield a weapon of your design into battle. Brontes gasped and clasped a hand to his chest in surprise. What? A humble son of Kronos? What sort of blasphemy is this? Kronos growled, ichor rushing to his face. Before he could finish, however, a hand was clamped over his mouth by his loving wife. Let's not threaten the people who are letting you go. The 6 Cyclops glanced at each other and snickered. There was another silent conversation between them before a consensus was reached. Ria, Ananke, it has been a pleasure seeing you after so long, Brontes said with a smile. You may go, brother. I hope you spend this new life you have given better than you have the last, he said to Kronos, who was silent. Lastly, the elder Cyclops turned to Naruto and smiled a broad smile. It was interesting. Not many would argue that Cyclopses or hecatonkires were handsome. However, in that moment, despite the hardships that had plagued them, Naruto found it amazing that these 6 children of Gaia and Oranos could keep smiling. Brontes' large green eye was filled with whimsy and an air of surprise. Nephew, we wish to see you grow strong and just. It's time a grandchild of the earth be a great and kind ruler that carries this world into a new golden age. Hey guys, so as you can tell, this story is back and better than ever. Check out chapter 1 as it has been rewritten. I'll be back soon, so bye, often. P.S. I am still deciding on the pairing. I am either going to go with Amaterasu, Artemis, or a secret pairing idea. If you guys trust me enough to go with the secret pairing, I promise you won't be disappointed. Chapter 3. Often do. Not own Naruto or Percy Jackson and the Olympians. They belong to their respective owners. Of King's blood, it was only Naruto's trained battle instincts that prevented from losing his head. It didn't have killed him, but decapitation by a 6-foot blade made of a combination of celestial bronze, mortal steel and adamantine didn't sound fun. He had barely been able to dodge the wide swipe from the scythe blade when he was forced to jump back again as its wielder brought the blade around and swung again. The young god landed in a crouch, his star-like eyes staring intensely as he began to ink his way through the situation like Pallas had taught him. It was such a large weapon that its swings were incredibly wide, thus slow. On the other hand, his opponent had the ability to slow an SP. Eat up time, which made the time not an issue. Glowing energy gathered in Naruto's hand as he plunged it into the dirt below them, a smirk on his face. Instantly, the ground shot up from the ground lick. A geyser before morphing itself into the shape of a giant fist. With the speed of a bullet, it flew at the side-wielding man with the intent to smash his body into a puddle of ichor. The man raised his palm to the flying earth fist. Stomata, stop. The fist froze. No movement, not a single budge. It wasn't even that the fist had hit a barrier. No, time had stopped for the fist before enough. Our wave of the man's hand caused time to speed up, disintegrating the fist into a pile of dust. Naruto growled, "Stupid overpowered time abilities. You're calling me overpowered, mister. I control all celestial bodies." His sparring partner responded before rushing Naruto, side at the ready. Naruto rolled his eyes. Whatever. His right hand dropped to his forearm where a bronze forearm protector was attached, and he placed a hand on the circle that covered the back of his fist. His bracer began to glow with golden energy as the circle became black. The golden energy began to whip around the black ball until it began to glow brighter and brighter. Naruto grinned as he shot forward, blocking the incoming attack with his quasar shield. He made sure to block the blade at an angle as it caused the weapon to slide off to his left side and throw his opponent off balance. He leapt into the air, his eyes aglow as he spun around and delivered an energy-enhanced kick to the face. The force was not to send his opponent flying into a wall, which immediately cracked. The man stood up and grunted as he was forced to dodge a blast of fire from his son. "This is beginning to become irritating," the side-wielding man grumbled. He shot forward, decreasing the time around him, thus speeding up his movements. He tried for a right hook, but a lightning-enhanced Naruto was fast enough to parry the strike and retaliate with a high roundhouse kick. His opponent ducked down to avoid the kick charged with thousands of volts of electricity, but that was his mistake. As he ducked, Naruto had changed his right roundhouse kick to an axe kick, which struck the man with enough force to bring him to the floor and bounce upwards. The situation only grew worse as when the man bounced up, he was met with a hard lightning-charged tornado kick to the chest. The man managed to land in a roll, only to quickly jump up when he noticed a jet of water shoot low to the ground. This brief moment was enough for Naruto to bring his left arm back before throwing it forward, disengaging the quasar and launching it like a giant shuriken at his opponent. The man's eyes widened as he tried to deflect the flying shield with his scythe, but the projectile was too fast. He only had enough time to bring his weapon in front of him before he was struck by the swirling quasar. Naruto's hand clenched itself into a fist. "Lyo, unleash." There was a bang more powerful than your average atomic bomb as the incredibly hot gas was released from the confines of the black hole with enough force to engulf everything in cosmic flames. It was an inferno beyond anything Hestia or Hephaestus could have ever dreamed of. No, this was the blaze of glory released when the thing that brings life is met with the thing that brings death. That is where the brightest flame is born. "Sferagizo, seal," Naruto said after the engulfing of his opponent in the heat of 1,000 stars was over. He held his hand out and the miniature black hole returned to his forearm, the cosmic gas quickly following until the quasar reformed on his wrist. Naruto walked forward to his downed partner, glancing at his blackened skin and leaking ichor with a bit of disgust. The burning blade of his shield was placed to the man's throat. "I got you, father." There was growl that erupted from Kronos' throat as the Titan King's eyes turned pure gold in rage. Energy erupted from Kronos' body as he released his titanic complete form, launching Naruto backwards from the sudden explosion of energy. A complete form was slightly different from a true form. An immortal's true form was the entirety of their usually suppressed being released. It was incredibly powerful, but not the same as a complete form. A complete form is something not many gods or goddesses remembered, let alone could perform. It was the application of shape and conscious control over one's true form. Kronos' gold and black energy erupted upwards until it was at least 100 feet tall before it began to take form. Naruto knew it could get much larger, but his father was most likely trying to protect the area subconsciously. The energy continued to condense and deform until it began to become humanoid. Golden ancient Greek battle armor began to form on the warrior as a face began to form. A shield made of a clock formed on its left arm while the infamous scythe formed in its right hand. A snarl appeared on the golden-eyed giant's face. "You're a few years too young to do that just yet." Naruto's eyes narrowed. His father's bloodlust was leaking out once more. He was usually kind, at least to Naruto and his mother, but at times, the crooked one leaked out. His hand went to the large cloth package strapped to his back and grabbed it, throwing it into the air. The black cloth immediately fell off as 9 shining blades fell, blade first, in front of Naruto. Each blade was made out of a transparent metal that appeared to glow with the light of a star. Each were short swords, about as long as Naruto's forearm and double-edged. A wave Naruto's hand unleashed the blade's true form as they quickly expanded until each blade was the size of your average longsword. Golden energy erupted from Naruto's body as he too released his complete form. His true form grew until it was almost as large as Kronos's, but instead of condensing into a humanoid cast, it became a creature on all fours. Long, slender ears appeared on top of a long face with a snout. A humanoid build for its torso including opposable thumbs began to form at the same time as a bottom half of a beast began to condense. Claws appeared on its hands and feet while sharp canines peeked out of its mouth. Lastly, 9 tails made of golden energy burst from the back of the beast with each of Naruto's 9 swords as the tips. "Stand down, father," Naruto snarled from the inside of his beast. His arms were crossed as he floated inside of the construct's head. His face was calm and stern. It looked odd on his 11-year-old body but still fearsome as he tried to think of a plan to subdue his father. Naruto was very strong for his age, but to defeat a millennia-old Titan Lord in his complete form was something possibly beyond his own abilities. Naruto's fox form disappeared in a burst of speed, reappearing behind his father with all 9 sword tails aimed at his head. Kronos deflected the tails with his shield while swiping with his scythe. He did not expect for the tails to recover from the parry and slice across the energy-formed bronze armor on his chest. Kronos was sent skiing back by the force behind the attack, the wound of his chest leaking a black liquid. A trade-off of the complete form of an elder immortal is the fact that complete forms are not able to regenerate. The only way to regenerate the damage done to a complete form was to add enough energy to upgrade it to the next form, which was not easy. Kronos growled as he looked at the damage done to his avatar. "You will pay." The clock on the side of his shield began to spin rapidly as the Titan Lord disappeared in a burst of light. Naruto's eyes widened in fear as he tried to cover his body in his tails. Sadly, his preparation was not fast enough as his father sliced a large gaping wound across the chest of his fox. Naruto's hand clutched his chest as black liquid began to leak out. Kronos smirked and licked his lips before charging. Scythe at the ready. Die. Naruto could do only one thing in the face of death, and that was open his mouth. Black and white energy began to gather in his mouth, collecting into a ball the size of an American house. Then it stopped growing and began to condense, getting denser and denser until the ground below Naruto cracked under the weight. Kronos immediately stopped charging as he realized what his son was doing. Even Kronos feared the power of the 9-tailed fox. For Naruto, the archaic practice of creating a complete form was an art lost in time. Thus, so much time had been spent in his complete form that the fox form had developed its own name and conscious. Its name was Kurama. With a roar, Naruto released a blast of energy stronger than the Master Bolt. Bijudama, as if they were one being, Kurama the 9-tailed demon fox roared with Naruto. The two launched a ray of black and white energy that moved faster than Kronos could dodge, whose only hope was to pray for the best. It struck Kronos' avatar and pierced a hole through his chest, dissolving the golden giant. Kronos fell to the ground with a thud just as Naruto released Kurama, who returned once more to his conscious. He glanced around at the damage the two of them had caused. This planet was at least a few hundred light years away from the solar system, so that the instruments humans wouldn't pick the spar between the two of them. The planet had been barren to start but had mountains and hills made of a tough red stone that had been pulverized by the power of their attacks. The water that had once covered the ground had been evaporated by the heat of Naruto's quasar release and his Bijudama, both of which had created new craters and valleys in the ground. Naruto walked forward and picked up his father, throwing his body over one shoulder. "Let's get you home, father." With that, the father and son disappeared in a flash of light. Ria reclined in her lawn chair as she sipped her lemonade through a pink swirling straw. Her eyes squinted shut for a second as the light her grandson's chariot blinded her before she slipped on the sunglasses Teddy's had given to her last Christmas. Life had been pretty easy over the last year. Japan was mostly beyond her children's field of vision, not to mention the presence of the Shintos deterred the Olympians from spying on the island. Thus, peace had mostly been uninterrupted and her only focus was using her domain properly for FHE first time in her immortal life. Ironic, wasn't it? The titaness of motherhood had never been able to properly raise any of her kids correctly. Maybe none of the Olympians' issues would have occurred if Ria had taught Zeus to share or taught Hades to forgive. Her grandchildren Hermes and Apollo would not be sleeping around as much as they were. Aphrodite and Hephaestus would probably have a children under her encouragement. History could have been changed. Ray's blue and green eyes darkened slightly as she thought about her husband. He was better than he was after the later children were born. He was almost the same Kronos that she had once loved back in the golden age of Orthes. Almost. Every now and then, when his bloodlust or anger came out, so did the persona their siblings had nicknamed the Crooked One. This was the Kronos who had kicked the sand of Gia into Koyo's eyes during a wrestling match. This was the Kronos that had used his shield to strike Hyperion in the forbidden place before striking him repeatedly with the flat side of his Xiphos. This was the Kronos who had swallowed his children to avoid being overthrown. This was the Kronos who had lived after his eldest son was killed. In a way, history did repeat itself as Naruto did calm down Kronos. Ria didn't know why. Perhaps it was the idea of having a son that wasn't trying to go after his throne, or perhaps it was the fact that Kronos was trying to groom his son to take the throne one day. Nevertheless, it was Naruto who changed Kronos from the evil he governed over to the husband to the titaness of motherhood. "Mother, we're home." Ria smiled her warm smile, the one her eldest daughter had inherited as she stood up from her seat and walked to the door to the garden. As soon as she opened it, a gasp escaped her mouth. Naruto was grinning in happiness, but his body told a different story. He was covered in grime and dirt, his spiky golden hair stuck to his head with sweat, his black basketball shorts in tatters, his white t-shirt supporting burns and a slash along the chest. Over his shoulder was his father, who was in even worse state. Ria frowned as she grabbed her husband from Naruto. "What did you do?" "I found this nice planet and father and I decided to spar. I hit father with my quasar so he got mad. We started fighting in our complete forms and I caught father with a Bijudama." Naruto said with a big grin. "Kurama is awesome." A cloud of red and gold energy Fort Naruto's back and came into being beside him, although still connected to Naruto. Only the torso of the creature came into existence, but it was immediately familiar. The same humanoid build, same smirk on its snout, same 9 tails swishing behind it. "I know I am," Kurama said with a smirk. Ria jumped in surprise of the being's sudden appearance and smacked him on the snout with a magazine she pulled from Chaos knows where. "Baka Kitsune." "Ow," Kurama mumbled. He rubbed his snout as he disappeared back into Naruto's subconscious. "Go get cleaned up. We have a meeting with a few powerful individuals," Ria reminded. Naruto nodded and ran off. Today was the first day that Naruto and Ria would be returning to Tartarus since his uncles had called. "This place needs a visit from Great Uncle Ether," Naruto commented. "The air quality down here is terrible." "Really? We're not even 5 minutes into this trip and you're already making jokes." "Sue me," Naruto said with a shrug. "So where are my uncles?" Ria gestured to one of the tunnels with her index finger. "They should be at the center forges." With that, she led Naruto down a path that looked identical to all of the others, the only difference being the slightly more worn dirt on the ground below them. He continued to follow his mother as she walked forward, his glowing blue eyes a little dubious of his mother's directional ability. She had lost him repeatedly since they had all moved to Japan. He never went to the supermarket with her again. The path made a sharp turn and there was a blast of hot air. "Do you know?" Naruto began before stopping, his jaw dropping in awe. Whoa! The center forges of Tartarus were amazing. 10 enormous forges were arranged in a circle around a big glowing ball that radiated enough heat to keep all of Canada boiling in the winter. Each forge in itself was huge, the size of your average mansion in Beverly Hills, with every tool and type of metal imaginable. Standing in front of 6 of the 10 forges were his uncles. Sweat ran down their bodies as they each hammered away at their own creations. Argus raised what he was working on to the light of the fireball to reveal it was an incredibly thin bird, so thin that it was invisible when turned sideways. "Brothers," Rhea called out. The eldest children of the sky and the earth stopped their shaping of the metal, well except Briars, who had a pair of headphones. Blasting Taylor Swift's "Shake It Off." A quick slap to the back of the head by one of his many-handed brothers brought him back to the real world though. "Little sister, nephew, welcome to our humble abode," Kadis greeted. Rhea gestured at the forges with a gut of her chin. "This looks very different from the last time I've been here." "Yeah, instead of using the river Phlegethon, Mother has allowed us to use the heat given off by her heart to warm our forges," Gigas explained with a smile on all 50 of his faces. For millennia, the 6 of them had been forced to use the river of fire that ran from Hades' realm to Tartarus. Despite the fact that the river was made of literal fire, it wasn't that hot naturally. It had taken months of work between Hephaestus and the 6 brothers to create a mechanism that channeled and increased the heat from the river so that it was hot enough to heat the divine metals they worked with daily. Naruto had been eavesdropping on the conversation, almost spit out the ambrosia he had been drinking when he heard what his uncle said. "Wait, this the heart of Grandma Gia?" "Yes, those stupid mortals call it the inner core, but really, it's the heart of Gia that warms the world," Gigas continued. Naruto nodded in understanding as he walked toward the big glowing ball in the center of the room. He stood a few feet away from it, far enough so that his family couldn't hear him and close enough to hear the faint thumping of the heart. With that, Naruto began to talk. "Hey Granny, my name is Naruto. We've never really met before, but I think you're cool. I mean, you made my dad his side, which is awesome, so you must be awesome too." "How are you doing, brothers?" Rhea asked. "Very well actually. With Kronos gone, we can use the time we spent to check on his cell and bring him food to forge new things. Zeus never summons us, so almost never are forced to leave what we love," Brontes explained. "I assume you don't get as many weapon orders as you used to." "Not really. It has been at least 6 centuries since there has been a newborn god, and I believe Hephaestus crafted a weapon for them," Sterapus said. "In fact, we haven't made a weapon for a god since we were asked to craft Artemis and Apollo's weapons, and that was millennia ago. Not to mention the fact that Athena, Artemis, even Apollo didn't have domains quite as powerful as Naruto's." Sterapus continued. "So we had to take some alternative methods to create these. Naruto, come over. It's time to see what your uncles have crafted for you." Rhea called to Naruto, who turned to her and nodded. Naruto quickly turned back to the glowing ball and waved to it. "Bye Granny Gia, see you later." As he turned around to run to his mother, he missed the small blast of green and brown energy that shot from the heart and struck him in the back, changing his body ever slightly. "Come here," Argus instructed. He grabbed an object from his forge and held it out to Naruto. It was slightly longer than Naruto's forearm and made of celestial bronze with the word "Nime" written in ancient Greek on one side in Stygian iron. "This too," Briars pointed out as he handed Naruto a black cloth-covered package that was easily 6 feet tall. "Whoa," Naruto mumbled. He quickly slipped on the forearm protector, which fit like the glove, before beginning to unravel the packaging of his other gift. His eyes immediately blinked shut for a second as he unwrapped the blinding light held within. Sitting inside the packaging was a sword that was around 5 feet tall and made of what appeared to be solid glass. It looked like a combination of an English longsword and a Zweihander with a long cross guard and a heavy pommel. The shield's restricted form is made of Celestia, bronze and Stygian iron, while its full form was a combination of a miniature black hole restricted inside an electromagnetic field along with another mechanism that constantly releases cosmic gas," Argus began. Something clicked inside of Naruto's head as he remembered something he had read. Making a quasar. Argus nodded. Correct. The shield is a quasar. Naruto's star-like eyes were wide in shock as he glanced at his weapon. That's awesome. Brontes gestured toward the weapon at Naruto's feet. The sword is made of the metal of a dying star. Ria raised an eyebrow. Swords. Yes. Chi's sword is actually 9 swords that combined can be wielded together or as one sword, Kronos explained, pride evident in his face. He had been the one who figured out how to engrave the storage rune on the star metal, thus allowing all 9 swords to combine and change sizes. Naruto mirrored his mother's expression. I have 2 hands. Starapus shrugged his shoulders. You can be creative and figure them out. They were forged with the hottest hellfire of Tartarus and cooled in the waters of Pontus. They represent the most vital part of your domains, the stars that give the heat that allow worlds to thrive. Kronos continued. Naruto nodded in understanding as he reached down and lifted the sword. As soon as his hands touched it, the black hole of his shield sparked into existence as a quasar rolled to life around it. Enough shining light shot from the 2 weapons to blind the 7 elder immortals as Naruto's energy erupted from his body in waves beyond anything he ever had before. All 7 immortals bowed their heads in front of the young god once more. All hail Naruto, son of Kronos and Ria, god of the greater heavens, bonds, energy, peace, nature, fate and the earth. Yetis raised all 50 of his eyebrows. The earth, I thought he was god of nature. Argus nodded in thought. I don't know, but it appears his domain has been extended past nature and the soul of the earth to the earth itself. Ria giggled and shook her head in exasperation. Strange things always happen with you, Naruto-kun. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.